Hi, morning everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Aik. I run the commercial team for the Asia Pacific and Middle East region. And today we have with us Hon-Man, who's our global supply chain officer for Meiyume, and we'll be here to cover the topic of diversifying supply chain risk and the new normal. So maybe let's start with introductions. Hon-Man, what do you do at Meiyume?
I am the Chief Supply Chain Officer in Meiyume. Within my responsibility, my team responsible for sourcing, engineering, product development, particularly on packaging and secondary pack soft goods, also quality, supply compliance, and sustainability.
So I think this topic is important because while we are here in Singapore during the week of Cosmoprof, I think a lot of people in the industry are really planning ahead for 2023. But the last 2.5 years have been pretty eventful. So not just the pandemic that we had to deal with, but also in more recent times, the geopolitical tensions that have been falling and coming to a head, and also in terms of the macroeconomic outlook,
right?
In terms of the inflationary environment, the strong likelihood of recession, not just in the US but beyond.
Right.
All this, would you agree with me to say that it's going to have an impact on supply chain planning?
Oh, we all absolutely. I mean, I think anybody who been around for the last few years have already experienced personally, professionally, all the impact throughout the supply chain, right? From where the origin of raw material to factories around the world making semi-finished product to finished product to actually moving product across the world from one part of the world to the other, right? It's not just restricted to Asia to US. It's actually US to Europe, Europe to US, everywhere in the world. Everybody have seen it, and it's across everything. It's not just electronic, it's food. You go to the grocery store, at different time we have shortages on even toilet papers and diapers and formulas for babies and stuff. So I don't think there's anyone in the world that's not impacted, because of what happened in the last few years and everything you just mentioned, right? And pandemic and geopolitical risk and sustainability, energy crisis and foreign exchange, and war in Ukraine and all this.
Yeah, I think one data point that we have here based on our research is actually in terms of prices of freight. Kind of skyrocketed earlier in the year, right? With the port-to-port spot rates peaking at 25K US dollars.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy prices. No one have ever seen anything like that. Over $20,000 for a container, right? Just move goods from China to US, China to Europe. So it's just crazy prices. It's just unimaginable.
Maybe on that note, be a good idea for us to also talk a little bit about the outlook for logistics.
Sure. Yeah. What we have seen, right? What we've seen, the record prices from a year 20,000, 25,000 that you mentioned has significantly came down. I mean, the latest number we've seen is way down to about less than 2,000 to get it's a big difference. Container from China to US West Coast. So you can see the peak and the valley. It's 1/10 of the price from a year. And a lot of factors impact freight. Obviously oil prices has impact because that's the cost of running the boat or flying the plane and things like that. But I think the bigger impact, in my opinion, is really supply demand. Right? When you a year or two ago, when there were fewer trucks and fewer planes and fewer boat moving stuff, and then you still have to move stuff. People still have to buy stuff. People still have to consume stuff. So it's a pure supply demand. When you have fewer boat, you still have to move things. Well, people pay more for it.
Yeah.
What we are seeing today is there's definitely a softness in demand. I mean, you mentioned about potential recessions, and we may be seeing recession in some countries around the world. So demand is definitely softer compared to a year ago. And we could argue a year ago when when there was a lot of demand, those real demand, or where there was a lot of inventory building up, right? Anticipating demand.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of company moving stuff and filling the channel. What we're seeing now, particularly in the U.S., is a lot of inventory clearing that's happening with the big companies, the big box company in the U.S. And since they're going through their own inventory, they're not putting more stuff through the inventory.
Yeah.
So that means demand is not as high as we would think.
Does that mean that next year, the availability of supply chain options, logistics options is going to be better, or do you think it will be any different?
I think that's a really difficult prediction to make it, and you can go the other way. I think it's depend on how really the economy goes. I think, particularly for the Western world, Christmas is going to be an important, well, every year is an important shopping season. So how well that goes and whether people really, feel a little more better about the economy or really pessimistic, I think that's the important data point. And if the company can move through a lot of majority of the inventory, they need to be, right? So that would create more demand and pull things through, so that you may see a little more demand going up. But if Christmas is going to be disappointing, then yeah, there's a real risk of going into recession and demand will be slow and prices may not, right? So it's a bit right now it's hard to predict. I would say 50-50.
How about in terms of predictability? Because for people who procure, people who ship goods, materials over oceans, I think lead time is very important. What's the outlook like?
Well, I think overall lead time is a little better than a year ago, right? A year ago there was shortage of labor, shortage of trucks, or even if your boat get to the West Coast, there's just no people to unload the container. So the container ship could be sitting outside of Los Angeles for 20-30 days, just waiting to be unloaded, right? And then once they unload, you still have to wait for the truck to move it, right? That has improved, but has not completely resolved it. We're still seeing dwell time, up to about 10 to 14 days. So the boats have to wait about a week or two before they can get unload. And we're seeing different labor actions, right? I mean, UK not too long ago they had strike at Felixstowe, right? One of the biggest container ports in the UK. US had some negotiation with the longshore shoremen, so I think that was at least temporarily relieved, so they didn't go into a strike. But with inflation the way it is, and worker, and rightly so, demanding to pay fairly, catching up to the inflation, and if they don't, it's also always a threat of industry action.
Yeah.
And if these folks go on strike, that could severely impact logistics, right?
It's interesting you brought up the point about unions, because if I look at what the Fed is doing with the interest rates, it seems like they think that part of the reason why there's inflation is because everyone has got good jobs and pay well. And part of the strategy to bring down the inflation, unfortunately, involves a bit of unemployment. And if it's going to be in our sector, logistics and supply chain, there might be an increase in industrial action, right?
Yeah.
That could be a bit scary.
It's a double-edged sword. I mean, you want to bring down inflation. That means you got to depress the spending and things like that. But because inflation is at 10%, let's just say, right, and everybody gets a 10% raise, and you actually fueling more the inflation. So it's a catch-22. Then again, right, if you're the people who's paying the same salary as last year, but everything gone up by 10%, it is very difficult to live in such an environment. So how to find that right balance is extremely difficult. So what the Fed is doing, increasing interest rates, try to slow down inflation, but at the same time, it could, right, may overly aggressive, it will push the whole economy into a recession. So it's a really fine line to manage.
And reminds me of an interesting data point that one of our speakers yesterday brought up. which was actually the portion of logistics in the national GDP. In most countries, it's about 10% of the GDP.
Somewhere in there.
In Indonesia, logistics takes up 20% of national GDP. And I imagine it's because it's an archipelago and there's really so much more effort involved in moving stuff around.
Right.
And since we're here in Singapore today, in terms of ASEAN, would you have any thoughts or any views on actually the outlook for the region or?
Well, I think you bring up Indonesia. I mean, India could be a similar situation because of infrastructures and things like that, right? So, and that's where the government investment comes in terms of building roads and bridges and high-speed rail and things like that to move things around, and that can bring the cost of moving product at 20 down to 10 or even lower, right? And that also fuel and drive not just to Asia, and I think it's a more of a global conversation on where to source those products, right? If everything, you say, okay, let's just buy everything, right? Say from China, and then we have to move everything from China to the rest of the world. I mean, you'd be creating a lot of these trouble, right? And that's time, and that's cost, right? And we've seen, like you said, a year ago, it's $20,000 a container, and that's a lot of money to move a container of anything. And it's lead time, and in such a volatile time, forecast has never been accurate. Even before, it just gotten so much worse, right? And for a lot of companies putting more stuff on the boat for 30, 40 days and try to predict what demand will be like 2 months from now, that's anybody's guess. So that also fuel and drive more need to source things closer to the consumption, right? For just flexibility reasons, agility reasons, cost reasons, inventory, and ultimate, and obviously also sustainability impact, right? The more boat and plane and trucking you need to use, that means you burn more fuel, more carbon footprint, right? And packaging too.
Yeah. And I'll add to the list probably also resilience, because if I recall the early days of COVID when it first happened, I think the world realized that global sourcing, while it may yield good value for money in terms of finding the lowest cost source markets, especially traditional manufacturing hubs, Asia and China. But that's on an assumption that the chain doesn't break.
Yeah.
Or doesn't get disrupted in a way.
Well, and it hasn't been disrupted like this. I mean, this is once in a 100-year pandemic, right? So none of us had actually lived through it. We have minor disruption. Well, minor. We have disruption, like the Japan earthquake, right? So that impacts some of the, high tech, semiconductor and stuff like that coming from Japan. Right? That impacted it, but it wasn't the biggest part of the supply chain, right? Taiwan earthquake, right? So it impacted some of the semiconductor that was made in Taiwan, but they will recover really quickly. But nothing in our lifetime, at least in my lifetime, I've never seen anything like this with the COVID and China being such a factory of the world, right? That has such a big impact on the world. And it's not just that, it's also because stuff just cannot be made, it could not be made, it could not move out. And for the last many decades, the whole world is so connected and so reliant, to your point, so reliant on certain location for raw material, manufacturing, and all the other stuff. And you look at China, we get a lot of product from there, but also there's a lot of raw material, sub-tier that's also coming from China. So the disruption is so much deeper, and in a scale that I don't think any one of us had ever anticipated. Because, after a while, after a long while, everybody kind of take it for granted. To your point, that's how things work.
And I'm reminded also because supply chain ecosystems, they don't get created overnight, right? It takes decades of time to pass before you have the first tier suppliers setting up shop and investments, machinery coming in, and then the next tier of vendors that feed them their input materials, right? From that perspective, actually, what's your take on traditional sourcing markets and versus non-traditional sourcing markets? Are there any bright spots or any options that you think stand out in your view?
And I think I think a lot of people and a lot of companies, even before the pandemic, would agree, right, that they need to have more resiliency in the supply chain. They need to mitigate risk and things like that, and they cannot be sourcing 99% of everything from just one location, right? It could be China, it could be Vietnam, it could be whatever. It's just that single point of faith. I think all company, CPO, supply chain, CEO would agree. However, to your point earlier, that when everything was moving, so doing well, when container is, at the low cost, the cost of shifting manufacturing away from that location that they have optimized is very expensive, right? It's like you go back 3 or 4 years ago, everybody would say, yeah, we should not source everything from one location. But then you say, okay, if I need to take this thing out from this location and move it somewhere else, the cost of setting up new supply chain, the cost of setting up new facility and getting all the raw material, it's just too much of a premium versus, this is not broken, so why break it and add more cost, and I can't pass all the cost to the consumer. What we have seen the last 2 years is obviously that fine balance, and you have one major disruption, it just completely throw everything out the window. So it's not something that people don't know. It's just now that we have to do it.
So what's the solution then? Is it going to be binary? Like if we don't go the direction of global sourcing, is everyone going to go for national or regional supply chains?
My opinion is we're going to see multitude of sourcing models. I think for the last several decades, we're so conditioned to do global sourcing. I don't think that's going to go away because, again, just say use China as an example. There's so much of the supply chains already built up, right? So to completely unplug and say, well, forget about it and restart everything new, it's not practical, right? However, there are things and then product and raw material and semi-finished product that should be and could be done in different parts of the world, right? It could be Southeast Asia. We talk about, a lot of people are doing manufacturing in Vietnam. Some people are looking in Cambodia, right? Europe, and, Western Europe, Eastern Europe has capability to do certain things. And then North America, Mexico, Central America. And even now you're looking at, and it's already happening, a lot of apparel, shoes and stuff is actually, all the way into Africa, right? So all these manufacturing, location, it's seeing a lot more investment, it's seeing a lot more push to go do things there. I don't think it's there to replace what we have. It's really to complement what we have. So where there are things that still make sense to source, say, from, in a global network, and there are also things going to make sense to be sourced and procure and manufacture closer to the point of consumption, right? And the two should be complementary. And in some cases, the two actually is in a collaborative mode, meaning we may not do 100% of everything in one location. We may decide to do a 50-50, 80-20 split, depending on the mix, the needs, and the version of whatever, right? That's one way of doing it. The other way may be you do a semi-finished product and you only do the final customization or the final assembly or the final finished product in region. And that would give the brand more flexibility to cater to what the demand is for that day, right? If I know, okay, people want the pink stuff tomorrow, I only put in the pink cover the moment people need it. So I don't sit on a whole bunch of black color or something like that, right? So that final customization, bring it closer to where the consumer is, also address the earlier conversation we had about unpredictability, forecast is always wrong, and the volatility and things like that.
That point. For our industry, and particularly for our company, are there any examples that you can think of that go to this point?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think in Meiyume, I think that's what we have been doing and we are continuing to do is to develop and build up supply chain solutions in North America and in Europe. And Europe includes Eastern and Western Europe, right? And we have had a very strong traditional Asia, China-based supply chain. So we have resources now in North America and in Europe to identify supplier, qualify supplier, adding them onto our total supply chain solution. So we can actually move things around the world or manufacture things in different parts of the world, right? Both in terms of a finished product or a semi-finished product coming from one location and do the final customization in region. And we have, product that could be a color compact with the base being the same, and you only put on a different top cover in region. So you can design a black one, and you can put on the black one in region, or you want to change it to the red one, you put on the red one in region. So that whole final customization could be done in region and give our brand, our customers more flexibility to deal with the volatility of forecasts. Yet still take advantage of a common base, a common chassis. We call it that that take advantage of the economy of scale when standardization makes sense, and you still have the mass customization capability.
I think we've been covering this topic quite thoroughly in terms of how to create a more sustainable supply chain. But I guess the topic of sustainability also covers the environment and climate.
Yes.
And I think this is a topic that probably has renewed focus after recent events also, heat waves, right?
Sure.
And climate change is a real thing staring in the face of a lot of people across the world. So for us in the industry, what's your take on the topic of sustainability and climate change?
Well, I think it's a very important topic, and it's something that is at the core of the Meiyume culture. You look at our vision statement, you look at our values, sustainability show up, in many different ways, right? Both in terms of product and processes. And we just got our latest EcoVadis score, and we're happy that we got the gold rating for all the work that we put in. While we are implementing, life cycle analysis or looking at our product, what's the carbon footprint, and what impact on water and emissions and things like that, in our product design and all this stuff. And we start measuring scope 1, 2, and 3 carbon emission, because that's where it's not just this industry. I think every industry are looking at, and our brands and our customer are demanding to understand how their product is impacting the environment, and it's our responsibility to give and provide to our consumers and customers a sustainable solution, both in terms of packaging product and also in formulations.
On the topic of formulations, I'm reminded because yesterday in Cosmopron there was a presentation actually on waterless formulas. I think this is one of those things that has gained traction in the past few years because I think the logic of shipping products that are 80%, 90% water across large distances starting to weigh on the minds of people. Like, why do we do that?
Right, exactly.
Right. So now in terms of the reverse logistics process, because I think that's a key part of making it work, right? Not just what we do in terms of ensuring sustainability and creation of products, but once it's used, for example, in-store, then you have to find a way to recycle it or to repurpose it, and that involves with a logistics chain that flows the other direction, and this requires infrastructure.
Right.
What's your take on?
Well, I think it requires infrastructure both at a country level and also at the brand level, to be honest with you, right? I mean, we don't own brand. We are not the brand. So we have to work with the brand to collect, to your point, to collect and then repurpose some of the old equipment and things like that. We can't do it alone. And we have to partner with the brand and also partner with the local partners, service provider to actually do the collection, to do the separations and reuse, and some of them actually cannot be reused and need to be separated. So, I mean, we'd be happy to work with the brand. I mean, that's something we want to do, but honestly, we can't just do it by ourselves, right? Because once we saw it, it's not our product. We can't go in and grab people's stuff. So we have to work with the brand and a local provider in order to close that loop.
And I think it's definitely a trend that's picking up pace because in terms of regulatory action,
Yep.
California just had something about this one, right? Before you can claim recyclable, you have to prove recyclability, which is tall order for especially for companies outside of markets like Europe and US that are a bit more mature in this respect. Yeah.
It's more mature, but it's also well, it's complex, right? But it's happening. It's not going to go the other way, right? And no country is going to go relax and do less. And every country is going to do. And what we're seeing is even everybody has the same goal, right? To be more sustainable in all metrics. How to get there? There are a lot of different interpretation, execution, implementation. It's not even country by country. You look at US, right? I mean, you mentioned California, right? It wasn't US. And there are 50 states in the US. So you could see 3, 4, 5, 10 different implementation and different timeline by states. And Europe, I mean, UK will have already have a different set, and then you have Europe. So even within Europe, there may be different variation. So while everybody is heading the right direction, what we're seeing is that's actually coming with many different kind of regulations and requirements and things like that, and it makes it really just complex. And that's something that we can help, right? We don't claim we know everything around the world and things like that, but we do have teams that are focusing on sustainability, focusing on regulatory, to keep tab of what's happening in California, what's the new law coming down from California, what's the new regulatory coming down from UK, what's the new policy coming down from Europe that will get implemented in 2024, something like that. So we can provide that, and when we need to provide that visibility to our team in terms of product design, and also provide recommendation to our customers, say, hey, you know what, you're launching this product in 2024, this is going to happen in Europe, so we need to start thinking about not to use this type of material, use that different type of material, even though we're still sitting in 2022, because by the time this whole thing is said and done, 2024 is right around the corner.
It's great you brought that up because it links to a question that we have over here, which asks how Meiyume keeps customers informed whenever there is volatility in the freight market. But I guess this doesn't just apply to volatility. It applies to anything that happens in the freight market, right?
Freight market, logistics, and we do work with our parent company, the phone group, and one is obviously they ship a lot bigger volume, so we leverage their size to get preferential treatment when it comes to cost and priority on availability, right? When we talk about the short on stuff. So you have a bigger size and we can leverage them for cost reason and also for availability. But the other thing is also leverage for information. Again, they are a big customer and we are part of the group. So, we can leverage them through those contract and contact to get what's happening in the freight market, right? What's happening in different lanes from southern China to Western Europe, southern China to West Coast. What's happening in those lanes? How busy are they? Those lanes are and things like that. So that all those information are very important. To your point, we can't get rid of volatility, but we can do better job of providing visibility
to our customers,
to ourselves, and things like that, right? So that's what we need to do. We can't get rid of volatility. I wish we could, but we can't, right? But at least we can tell you what's happening.
So just a note to our live viewers: keep the questions coming. But if you're not able to take them live, we'll get back to you via email, by correspondence.
Yep.
We have about 5-10 minutes left in the call. So I also want to give some time actually talk to maybe change the direction a little bit on Hon-Man in terms of the outlook part, and maybe get your thoughts on what's out there that can be done to improve the supply chain. Actually, any technologies that can be implemented that you've seen in your line of work that actually can give us a bit of hope for the future. Actually,
well, we should always have hope for the future, right? Actually, there are a lot of technologies already available. I mean, what we have seen available in all different places. It's not so much about the technology is not available. To me, it's actually more about implementing the technology in things we do, right? I mean, you talk about freight tracking and things like that. I mean, that's not new. I mean, you know, if any one of us buy stuff from, you know, those websites and things like that, and you can actually use your app and tell you when your package is, shipping from where to where, and it's clearing custom in Singapore, and it's gonna arrive at your door tomorrow at what time, right? So, I mean, that technology already exists. It's just taking that technology and that same concept and applying onto, at a container level, even at a pallet level. So as a customer, you may be sitting in your office and you know exactly where your pallet is in the middle, Pacific with the latitude and the longitude, right? Things like that. And when it's a clearing custom at the West Coast, and it will arrive at your warehouse and things like that. So those, tracking technology is already there. It's really about connecting the information. Again, we can't we can't control pandemic. We can't control when the next disruption gonna come, right? But having the connection, the data connection, the information, give people visibility and know where things are, right? And that's very important, right? When you know where things are, you know what your needs will be, then it gives you a better slightly better predictability, and you can take action about it rather than reacting to, oh, things didn't show up, what I'm gonna do. Right? You give yourself a few day lead time is better than no lead time at all. Right?
It makes perfect sense, because I think in supply chain management planning, we're talking about different types of flows, right? The flow of goods and materials, that's physical flow. And then there's also the flow of information. And while things on the analog side of the house, maybe we can't accelerate that much because we are moving things across oceans, across spaces. But when it comes to information, there's no reason why, it may not be instantaneous, but it could be a lot faster, I guess.
A lot faster, right? And a lot more available. I mean, today, a lot of information are available. Unfortunately, they're not connected. That's the problem, right? I mean, we have a lot of information, and we still do have a lot in Excels or whatever, right? And it's not being automatically move along that information chain, right? So I may have the information, but I never actually pass it on to you. That's as good as not having it, right? So I think that is one layer of it. Then you get into the more physical layer. I mean, the pandemic, cost, inflation, and things like that. Labor costs around the world, labor right, human right thing to do. The standard will continue to rise, right? I mean, we still say, oh, Vietnam, China, relatively speaking, labor cost is still lower than Western Europe, things like that. But there's only one way to go: is just continue to increase, right? No one's willing to take a lower wages and things like that. And also, with the new generation, there are fewer and fewer people, and this is just civilization moving along. Fewer and fewer people willing to go to work in a factory. The younger generation, there are much more opportunities in the village, in the rural area where they live. There are fewer people willing to leave their home to go to the coastal areas in China to live in a dormitory and work in a factory. I mean, it's just fact, right? And there's more opportunity in where the hometown is and things like that. So that means the labor force, the workforce, the labor availability is also shrinking.
And that will drive up.
That will drive up costs. Even you pay 10-20% more, people don't want to work there. So what that drive is automation, right? Can these things be done automatically? Or it also drive design different so that we don't require so much, manual labor to put things together. Can we design things that right off the gate, it's almost done. And all you need to just put 2-3 parts together, and you don't need a whole assembly line of 20 people doing that kind of stuff, right?
And I imagine it makes things a bit more predictable and easy to control for business, because machines don't fall sick.
Machines don't fall sick, and they can yep, they don't, they work 24 hours, other than maintenance and things like that, and they would not worry about pandemic and things like that. So that's not to replace human being, but I think as cost of human being become higher and higher, and also standard become higher and higher, we should be looking at how do we leverage us, right, human being, to do higher value work. Our value is on, decision making, looking at things that are not just black and white, right? The more tactical black and white stuff, we should leave as much as possible, leave it to the computer, leave it to the machine to go deal. We as a human being should be more on the cerebral side, the thinking part of it, right?
I'm mindful of time. Since we are on topic of like wages and cost, I think one thing that has impacted so far the last 2 years is currency fluctuations, forex. Do you foresee that this particular issue might be something to look out for going forward?
Absolutely. I mean, you look at the depreciation of the Japanese yen, you look at euro and the British pound, and the strength of the US dollar. I mean, that has huge impact on business, any business that do multinational business. It has impact on any one of us, all of us, right? When we're buying things and things like that. How to manage it? I mean, to be honest, I would not want to give any advice on foreign exchange and things like that, because I first of all, I'm not an expert on it, and I don't want to give anybody like wrong information. We got to put a disclaimer on it and say, take your advice at your own risk, and things like that. But I think it's just challenging. I mean, I'm not a finance expert, but I think it definitely has impact, right? I mean, cost of material, US dollar importing material, exporting, all has huge impact on the company. How to manage it, I think that's where very good question for the CFO on what to do with
currency experts. I just want to bring it up because I think that probably completes our view of all the factors, right, that we have to be mindful of. But I think we've also heard some good examples of how a partner like Meiyume is able to help manage those fluctuations, those uncertainties,
right,
with a bit more information. And I think if you talk about the issue of risk, some people define it as a lack of information, right? So if you have more information, things they might seem less risky all of a sudden. So
right, we can't take away the risk, but we can always improve on visibility and transparency, right? And more, exactly to your point. If you know more, you can at least give you more information to manage that risk.
Would you want to leave any final advice, or maybe a one sentence for our viewers in terms of 2023, all that we've discussed? Any advice for them in terms of?
I wouldn't say advice. I think it's just kind of more of a comment. I think we have lived through last 2 or 3 years of pandemic and seen unprecedented disruption. Unfortunately, I don't think 2023 is going to be okay. Everything back to normal. We just snap back to 2018 or something like that. So I think we need to be prepared and mindful of things will happen. Unpredictable things will happen. We should plan for it, right? And hopefully it doesn't happen, but we should not assume nothing will ever happen, right? So it's some of that mental preparedness, both in terms of our personal area and also from a business perspective, supply chain, could be finance, could be sales and marketing operation, right? I mean, what the last couple of years told us, it's just because it hadn't happened in the last 90 years doesn't mean it won't happen. And with the climate change and things like that, we could be seeing more severe weather, that extra hot, extra cold, stronger hurricanes and bigger snowstorms and flooding and things like that. I mean, unfortunately, I would love to say that will not happen, but given what we have done in the last since industrial age and stuff, unfortunately, extreme weather is going to be around for a while.
The ways to manage it.
Yeah. So we need to prepare our supply chain and even our own personal life to handle such disruption.
Thank you so much for your time, Hon-Man, and for joining us today.
No problem. Well, thank you.